tell you, I have been friends with this man for over 20 years. My friend Gabe Hobbs introduced me to him. And then as we started talking years ago, my wife used to book him for my show on Fox Sports Radio. And I did this to Chris Landry the last month. Sills, I'm at the Combines. Sills, I'm at a pro day. Sills, I'm at a pro day. And you know what I kept doing? I love that. Because Chris is not like a guy who's just going to sit here and just start barking shit. He sees the player. He evaluates, hey, guys in shorts versus your tape. That's kind of how he looks at it. And I said this. Okay, I said this. I think there's 3 wild players in this draft, maybe 4. Will Anderson, Jalen Carter, Bijan Robinson, and maybe Tyree Wilson. The rest of these guys, I think they're good. I think you probably get down to 55 where you have some players that are going to help your team. I don't really think this is that strong a draft. I might be wrong. Chris may say, you're a little off base here with this. Safety position's not very good. Linebacker position's not very good. DT's not deep. You're not seeing any of that. Okay, those are my opinions. Let's go over to our friend from Landry. He is Chris Landry. Chris, I'll tell you, every time I contacted you, I kept with a smile on my face because that's great, man. He's out watching these guys. He's out at the pro days. He's at the combines. He's at all of this, and he's watching this, and he's really getting up close and personal with the players. And so I don't pollute the question to you, Chris. What were your takeaways from these 300-plus kids that you think could get drafted in a couple weeks when it comes to the depth of this draft? Is it good, bad? Do you think it's a strong draft? What's your takeaway?
First of all, my takeaway is that if I could reach the big time like my man Sills, I wouldn't have to continue to work for these and consult for these NFL teams and have to be at all these God blessed pro days for my 41st NFL draft. But no, seriously, every draft has got their own personality. They're good players in every draft. This one has got its own personality. You got a couple of quarterbacks that are really good and some that are intriguing. You got some running backs that's got some depth. You got a couple of them that are pretty good early. The receivers, you've got some good ones, but it's not as good at the top, but it's got depth. Tight end's got some depth. Defensive tackle not as deep. I think you got some better edge guys. You got some corners that can help. It's like anything else. What I tell people, the draft is not what it's made out to be in the media. It's not about mock drafts. It's about, and I do work for a lot of teams. Everybody's board looks different. So when you say, "Oh, I can't believe it," those boards you read in those mock drafts, that's not reality. It's, Dan, you know this, that different teams have different styles and look for different type of skill sets. So a linebacker that's a perfect fit for Bill Belichick is not somebody that Pete Carroll's going to like, and vice versa. Just for example, and both are successful. So keep that in mind that there's no, well, that's the best linebacker. That's the best. No, it's not. It's going to be different. There's some guys that are elite, some guys that can play for anybody, any scheme, anytime, anywhere. But a lot of it is about finding the right fit. And to me, it's about finding, I've done work, had a long-term relationship with Bill Belichick. He'll have, we talked the other day, I think they've got on their total board, I can't remember if it's 63 or 67 guys.
That sounds about, I think that's right.
But that's all they have every year. And the point is there are a lot more guys than that are going to play in the league. But for them,
yeah,
that's what, and that's what people need to see. So that's a long-winded way of saying, yeah, there's some really good players. Find them. It's not recruiting. It's not like, when Sills was playing for Miami University and they get Big Sills, they get Sapp, they get all those guys. You can't get all those guys. You gotta find the guys that are going to fit for you, and you can't get the 3 top defensive tackles in this draft. You gotta find some value later, and that's what the draft process is all about.
Before I get into where the Eagles should go, I want to give you a history, and I know you know this. And when I try to explain this to people and what I've done over the last 2 years and how I've looked, I look at operating procedures and how, like you said, Chris, their mannerisms on how they handle the draft and how Howie is better at pro personnel. I think they're better at pro personnel than they are at the draft. I think they're better at making deals. And I want to show you this, and maybe this goes to what I see and how they look at the draft. Since 2000, since Howie Roseman's been in the building, they've drafted 37 defensive backs. I was like this. Lito Shepherd, couple dudes. I mean, that's a failure. Defensive ends, 25 they drafted. Brandon Graham, Josh Sweat. Okay. They've drafted 25 wide receivers. Jeremy Maclin, Deshaun Jackson, Devontae Smith. I mean, linebackers, 23. I can't name you one. My point, Chris, is that when I look at O-line, exceptional. But the rest, Chris, why am I to believe that Howie Roseman is going to sit there at 10 and pick a quality guy when he's got 2 guys on the starting roster right now in the offense that were first rounders? The rest of them were mid rounders. And you know this, Chris, it's because that falls in line with the best player available. Give me your sense of the Eagles and how Howie drafts.
Well, first of all, and I've told you this before, Howie is not from a football background, not coaching, not scouting. The reason why they're better in pro personnel is because their strength in the evaluation process of the coaching staff. They're a coaching staff-driven evaluation team. Scouts do the background work. Howie doesn't sit there and say, I like this guy. Howie doesn't know. That's not what he does. The coaches make those decisions. Howie's there to understand cap, understand how to do deals, and he's great at that. So the reason they're better in pro personnel is coaches, for the most part, are going to be better at evaluating pro personnel because that's what they do all year long. They're evaluating not only their team, but the players on teams that they're playing and the players that they notice on teams that they're not playing, but they are part of the exchange thing. And Dan, I'm sure you talked about this. So if you're in the NFC East and you don't play the Chargers if you're the Eagles this year.
No,
but
if
they play Minnesota and they see the Chargers play Minnesota, they see. So in other words, they know the league. The coaches do. The coaches are not as strong on the college side, and the scouting staff it's not bad, but it's not their strength. That's why they are what they are, and that's why they kind of manage it the way they do. And look, they do deals. They get deals, and they pick up, like a guy from the Saints that's Gardner Johnson. Guys like that, they're able to find guys because their coaches say, this guy can help us. And then Howie goes and does a deal, not because Howie's identifying the players. It's because Howie's taken I'll say it. He's taken the lead from the coaches, and basically he kind of works for the coaches, even though he's the boss. He works for them because he knows how to stay in his lane and do what he does best. And not every guy does that.
I would say this to you too, Chris. Explain this to people and myself. Okay, so in my opinion, at 10, to me, Bijan Robinson makes sense. I'll tell you why. He's one of the top 5 players in the draft. They're probably a player away from winning the Super Bowl. It helps Jalen Hurts. Tell me why I sit there and do, well, Sills, nobody's going to take a running back at 10. They're going to take an edge rusher. Why would you take the lesser player, the lesser evaluated player, and go with need? They did that last year, Chris, with Jordan. Jordan Davis was a player down in the 20s. They took him 13 and they overdrafted again. Aren't you trying to eliminate that by getting the best player? What's your philosophy? Do you go best player or do you go need, especially in the top 10?
Okay, when you're great what's important to understand out there, it's not how they're ranked, it's how they're graded. So, for example, I'm going to use a grading scale that I've used for 40 years because a lot of teams use it and I've been a part of it. So 7.4 to 7.0, I won't go into the long-run details exactly what that means. That's the highest grade, 7.4 to 7. That's the highest plateau. You may have 2-3 players in a draft on a good year that fits into that category. Then you got 6.9 to 6.5. Those are immediate starter guys. So follow me. Those are different grade plateaus. So when the Eagles pick a 10, the 7.4 to 7.0s are going to be gone. You're going to have a number of guys in that 6.9 to 6.5 category. So by definition, all of those guys are graded equally.
So you're drafting in the pool.
Yes. So like Bijan Robinson, nothing wrong with outstanding to your point. Love it. But what if Wilson from Texas Tech is there? That's as good a player as Bijan Robinson at an edge position. So my point is people think that, okay, the 10th best, let's just use numbers, straight numbers. Well, the 10th best player is really better than the 11th. No, not necessarily. You may have 3 players in that upper tier, and then you have players 4 through 14 that are in the next tier. Where you could be 4, you could take any one of the remaining players. 4 to 14, they're all game because they're all graded equally. Now, you might have them stacked here or there, and you might eliminate a guy or two because of character, because of medical or something like that. But they're all in that same grade plateau. So that whole thing of, well, I read on a mock draft, I read on somebody's top 50 that this guy's 10 and this guy's 18. There's no difference maybe between a 10 or a guy ranked 10th and 18th. They may have the same grade. But there may be a big difference between player 3 and 4. But player 4 through 14 may be the same grade. That's what we try to do at LandryFootball.com. We explain that it is the grade that takes you to the stacking. The stacking it matters within the grade grouping. If you're in the same grade plateau, man, have at it. Go with the cleanest, safest player. And if you've got Wilson and Bijan Robinson, maybe a couple of others, then you can say, I like this guy a little bit better. Or B, where is their greater depth? So, for example, if you've got a great defensive end that's graded the same as Bijan Robinson, what is the better chance to get an impact player at one of those positions in the 2nd, 3rd, or 4th round? Probably going to be better depth at running back. So that is why backs get pushed down a little bit because they're more fungible. They're more of them, whereas they're not as many good big guys as that can be impact guys, although you can find some.
That's why Derrick Henry went in the 2nd round.
Yeah, and he is who they build their offense around. And if you look at it, for them, yeah, it'd be worthy of taking, him in the 1st round if you wanted to, like it's worthy of taking Bijan Robinson. But what if there's a better player? So the answer is, well, why wouldn't they take Bijan Robinson? No reason to not take him unless there's a better option. And we don't know who's going to be on the board. When you're at 10, you have a better idea than when you're at 20, because there are less variables. But that is the function of draft management. Let's figure out on this board how many of these guys that we really think are potential Eagles or Steelers or whatever you are, and let's get as many, let's maximize it. So I love Blaine Bishop, but I got him Blaine Bishop was an 8th round pick. We don't have 8th rounds. Bob Sanders was a great player, but you didn't have to take him that high. I mean, you didn't have to take him in the 1st round, even though they probably graded it. Well, if you don't have to take them that high, Dan, then it's supply and demand like anything in business. So get you another good player and get him later. But I think you can fool yourself a little bit too much. I missed out on Curtis Martin. I don't know if I ever told you that story, but I wanted to draft him, and because he had all those injuries at Pitt, I waited one more round too late, because 2 picks before we picked, Parcells took them. And so sometimes you could talk yourself out of that, but you're trying to maximize getting as many of those players. So that's a big part of the draft strategy.
How about this here? and tell me if you think I'm on or I'm off here with Jalen Carter. I have never in my 30 years broadcasting since I stopped playing ball and I've been in it, have I ever compared a player to Jerome Brown. And I see feet, hands, lateral movement, strength, and more importantly than I saw with Jordan Davis, production. He's an awful productive player. He knocks the pulling guards off. He gets penetration. He's got phenomenal feet. Now, he's got the same kind of issues that JB had when he came out of Miami. Little bit of a recluse on the edge situation. If he falls to 10 and you're the Eagles, would you draft him if you were head of the personnel department?
It's hard to think that there'd be a better player. We're talking about maybe a better player is on the board. There won't be a better player on the board at 10 if he's at 10. Now, the question is, does your intel, does your psychological evaluation determine that he's a problem? Okay, so everything you said about him is right. I think he's as good a player as he is in this draft, period. He's just a dominant player. Like a lot of big guys, he kind of puts on a little weight. He picks his spots.
You think he's as talented as Sue coming out?
Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah. I tell you, though, Sue had a little bit of Sue didn't make plays on. Sue's issue was he'd step on your neck, and he'd never take a play off, but he might kick you after the play. This guy will take some plays off a little bit. And the off-the-field stuff is a concern, but I don't think he's a bad kid. I think you got to do at 10. I'd be nervous taking him at 2 or 3 because there are those players that I mentioned, 2 or 3 of those guys in the 7-4 to 7-0. He's one of them. Now he might have a shield on him, which is a shield as maybe a character sheet or some questions. Yeah, at 10, he's one of the elite guys. I think he could be one of those elite defensive tackles. And you just, through your homework, you got to make that determination. Do you trust him?
How important is the interview when you're talking that player versus the tape?
Big. The most important thing.
Yeah.
Because the tape's easy. I know what type of player he is. Interview with him, but you got to know the people. And one of the things I do at the pro days and this time of year is when you've done this for 30, 40 years, a lot of these coaches, particularly now that are coaching, they were young kids coaching when I get in. And when you help them get jobs, they'll give you the skinny on a guy. They're not going to tell you something. They're not going to sugarcoat it because they may need a favor from you. And you got to get the right intel. If you're good with him, the tape's easy on this guy, Dan. The tape's easy on him. It's just the other stuff. I don't think he falls to 10, but if he does, as I said, I don't think there's anybody that's better on the board at 10 still left than
Here's why
Jalen
it makes
Carter.
sense, Chris, for Philly, because the guy who recruited him is the D-line coach and Tracy Rocker. You've got Nakobe Dean and you've got Jordan Davis. I mean, you have all the personal. I mean, he went into the home, recruited the family to bring him to Georgia. I mean, to me, maybe you even trade up if it's 2 spots to get him. I mean,
I think you absolutely, all those things are on the table, and I think it depends on how it plays out. And I think the answer is, how does he fall? So I think when if he's there at 7, 6 or 7, that's when you start to think about, okay, do we need to move up to get him? I was in a situation several years ago where it wasn't the same issues, but I liked the guy coming out, Javon Curse. And we tried, Dan, to trade up to get him. We were sitting there at 16, and we tried to move up, and we couldn't get him, and we couldn't move him. We couldn't get him out to do a deal. We just couldn't, and he fell right in our lap at 16. So you never know. Sometimes it can happen, but I don't think he falls all the way to 10. But I didn't think Javon would fall over to 16, which is why we were constantly trying to move up. But he's that type of player that I would absolutely, in the Eagles situation, be ideal. And what's the strength of that team? It's been the lines of scrimmage both ways. And to get a guy that good, That's why that team is so good. The quarterback's coming along, and they can run the football, they can defend the run. They're good on both sides because they're good on both sides of the line of scrimmage. Why not take a guy that can be a generational player, that can be a dominant player, that, could be like some of the elite guys that we see, dominating, that we're talking about getting big defensive tackle money. This is a guy that's going to be in that same boat again. If his character shapes up, I think he's going to be a great pick.
Couple last questions for you, Chris. I talked to Cornelius Bennett the other night, and I said to him, man, Will Anderson, he reminds me of Cornelius Bennett, 6'4", 253. Biscuit may have been a little bigger. And I said to him, I go, this guy's the best player across the board. He would have been the first pick in last year's draft.
Excuse me.
He is going to be a premium pick in this draft. He's the best player in both years, I think. Chris, I look at him, and it looks like potentially Arizona, the relationship that Jonathan Gannon has. Would he be worth going up and getting him at number 3 and putting him on the other side of Hassan Reddick? And you look at that line then in Philly, you'd have Will Anderson, Josh Sweat, Jordan Davis, Fletcher Cox, and Hassan Reddick on the other side. When you're close like that, Chris, to winning a Super Bowl, and you lost players, they lost 5 starters in free agency. Would you contemplate moving up to get him at 3?
Sure, I would. If I could do a deal, depending on the cost, absolutely. Will Anderson is everything you mentioned and more. I think the thing that people don't talk about enough, this guy is not good. He is great against the run. Great. He is so long and strong. You talk about, I'm sure, a bunch with your listeners, setting the edge. A lot of guys can't do that. They're up the field, and this guy sets the edge, and he sets it, and he locks on. This guy he's one of, when I talk about the 7'4" to 7'0", he's in that group too. So, yeah, now I think because he's so clean, it's probably why you're talking about it this way. The chances of, Carter maybe dropping a little bit or there, this guy ain't dropping. You got to go where you just said. He got to go after the quarterbacks, because, I think he's right there. If teams go, quarterback, and then maybe quarterback, then you're right. You might have the best player in the draft sitting there at 4. Overall, and of course we understand the need to go get your quarterback if you don't have one, because those guys are good too. But this guy's really good. So why not? And I do think that, you're never one player away, but to your question and your focus on the Eagles, and I know you're involved in talking about them a bunch. They are a team that's really good, and one impact player through the draft signings could be enough to put them over the edge. And we saw how close they were. They were certainly, good enough to win it last year and didn't get it done. But a guy like this would work, and they've got picks, multiple picks
next year.
They've got some leverage to do it. It makes a whole lot of sense. Now, I'm sure, and this is what I think Howie is the best at doing, he's also looking at contracts and what it's going to cost, not only this year, but next year. So keep this in mind. I'll leave you with this. Keep this in mind, that the draft sometimes, when a pick doesn't quite make sense, it's a message sent to what is probably going to happen contractually on players on their current roster after next year. So sometimes it's why you need to really hold true to staying with your grades and getting the better players, because the need factor, the need becomes, it changes, Dan, based upon who you're able to re-sign, who you lose, who gets injured. So, the strength on Monday, next Sunday, is all of a sudden we need 2 more guys at that position.
Finally here, Chris, what's happened in Baltimore? For an organization that just landed on just insane draft picks, were great in free agency, And I get the changing of the guard of Ozzie to Eric DeCosta. I get that. You had 3 years to get this Lamar Jackson deal done, and you couldn't get it done. I mean, is it really just front office that has allowed this thing to disintegrate the way it has?
Dan, I got a different reading on it. They have made really good offers. I haven't seen it on paper, but I've heard some of their offers. I think the problem is the opposite. I think the problem is Lamar doesn't have an agent. And so he's got in his mind, and you know where I'm going with it. I'm not a
Deshaun Watson.
Well, Deshaun Watson, but it's the fact that this guy doesn't have an agent. Lamar doesn't have an agent. And so
he doesn't like the shit that's being talked to him because that's an ugly process.
And you can't have that. You had an agent, and you got to have somebody, say, Dan, I love you, but let me tell you what the market is for you. I know you think you're worth $5 million, but the market says you're worth $4 million.
And they have a problem with you, and they have a problem with you showing up to workouts late. And you know what? You need to get your ass in. When you're being told that directly, Chris,
you take it personally, which is
bad.
The role of an agent. The agent is to say, I get it, and I will buffer that and make sure that my guy doesn't hear your tone in which you said, but he gets the message the right way, and he understands that we all love you, but, sometimes you got to say stuff. You've been there, done that.
Oh, yeah.
He doesn't. I mean, he has totally lost this, and I get it. He wants this guaranteed Deshaun Watson deal, and I don't, unless somebody breaks ranks, Dan, my understanding is at the owners' meeting, ain't nobody doing it. So, okay, is he going to get tagged? Is he going to show up on the tag? Is he going to do the Kirk Cousins deal, get tagged twice in a row? And then, play this like you want, Lamar, but not having an agent. Look, I hate to say this, they're worth their 3% or whatever they get, because this is the problem. Right now, it's an impossible deal to do because the player doesn't want to talk to you. He's pissed off. Well, how are you going to do a deal? They haven't talked in I don't know how long. They made an offer, and I don't have the numbers with me, staggering. So people think, they couldn't get a deal done. Well, it takes two to make a deal. They made an unbelievable deal. But if you want the fully guaranteed Deshaun Watson deal, I don't think you're getting it from any team in the league. So you're probably going to have to get your guaranteed money through the franchise tag and maybe get it again for the franchise tag. And then that's where it seems to be headed, unless it doesn't appear Lamar's going to budge on what his thoughts are. And I don't think he has enough of an understanding of how contracts in the league works. And I think that lack of a buffer is just killing this negotiations. I see the problem being on Lamar's side. And I get what you're saying. Get it done. And I've been there before. Why haven't you get it done? Well, I've done everything I can. But, the deal is a beyond good deal that they've. It would make him in that range of the loaded of not completely fully guaranteed, but Dan, it would set the market on its heels what they've offered, and he's just turned it down. Okay, I don't know I don't know where to go from there. I don't know.
LandryFootball.com. Chris has got all the player breakdowns. He goes to every single pro day. He's been to the combines. NFL teams have him as a consultant. I have known him for over 20 years. Please make sure you go to the website. Little more information for them, Chris, so they know where to go just in case.
Yeah, LandryFootball.com. I got a really good offer at the front. We call it the scouting season offer. If you want to get the rest of the draft information, free agency, it'll take you all the way through next football season to next year at this time. It's the best deal we've got going, but you can try it out for a month or 6 months. Also subscribe to the Landry Football Podcast Network, wherever you get your podcasts, and you can listen to. We do a lot of different podcasts, but the LandryFootball.com is where you get the most detailed, the most unique breakdowns from a coaching, scouting, and front office executive standpoint on the college game, the NFL game, recruiting, transfer portal, free agents in the NFL, the draft, you name it. If you like football, you're going to love LandryFootball.com. If it involves players, teams, coaches, schemes at the college or NFL level, we got you covered.
Chris, thank you, my friend. I appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for your patience and waiting me to get off the road. Appreciate
you bet. Anytime, man. That's
All
great.
right,
I know he's out working. That's why I got to take a quick time out, Tone. I haven't taken one. Please hit the like button. Keep it here on the National Football Show.